Hi, this is Carol, and this is a processing tutorial for Photoshop for beginners in Astro-imaging. I'm using Photoshop CS3. I would think the controls are probably very similar in the other versions. And this is an image of the Horsehead Nebula done with a DSLR camera quite a few years ago. And I've stacked it in DSS, Deep Sky Stacker, and this is how it comes out from Deep Sky Stacker when it's saved in Photoshop. It's a very dark image showing very little detail at all. All you've got is one bright star and lots of faint ones. So the first thing you have to do is stretch the image using levels and curves, and you can find them in Image, Adjust, Levels, and I usually start with levels. Now, what you'll get in levels is a dark pointer, a grey slider, and a white slider. I never touch the white slider in levels because it just blows up the stars. So if the dark slider had been further over to the left, or I should say if the histogram had been further over, I would slide that in, but it's not. And you should never move that black slider beyond the histogram or even past it. So the only thing I can do on this is move the grey slider across to the left. And already you can see it's brightened up the image. It's very pink because it needs the colours balancing. But that's the first thing that I do. And then I click OK. So I'm going to do that again and see what happens in levels. And now you can see the sliders moved over to the left a bit. Or I should say the histogram's moved over to the right. So there's plenty of room to bring that black slider in. But you can see there's all these little wiggly bits along the line. What they are these black edges, which is obviously where the frames haven't quite lined up properly. So what you can do to get rid of that is you can cut those off. This is the marquee tool over here. If I right click on it, you get a rectangular marquee, a circular one, and I never use those there. So take your rectangular marquee and draw a square on the area that you want to keep. So we're going to cut off that little bit at the bottom, and I'm going to say Image and Crop, and I'm going to deselect, select, deselect. So now I've cut off those edges. So we can now go into Image, Adjust and Levels again, and you'll see that's fairly clean on the left hand side. So bring the dark slider across, and the grey slider's shifted across now, so you can bring that in again. Okay. This tool here is called the navigator, so you can increase the size of your image or decrease the size of your image. This is the layers tool, which I'm not going to talk about this time because that's probably for the second tutorial. So here we've got an image that's starting to look like something. You can see the flame here, you can see Orntac, you can just about make out the horse head there. So just going to shut the door because my dog's barking. What we need to do next is balance the colours. Now, if you look in the window, there's all sorts of, window, there's all sorts of tools that you can use. So what you need really is this thing called the histogram, and opening that up, you can see that the red and the green and the blue are not lined up at all. So we're going to go to Image, Adjust and Levels again, but we're going to select the red and we're going to move that across so it's closer to the green and the blue. And you do that by moving one of these sliders. So that's sitting above the blue, and now, sorry, the green. And now we're going to move the blue so that is also sitting underneath. That's the wrong way. So we get them sitting on top of each other. Okay. So now you can see the colours are balanced. So I'm going to minimize that so it's not in the way using that tool there. So now we can go into image adjust levels and we can see, we can bring the grey slider in and it's not that horrible red mess. So we're part way along doing our processing now. Now the next thing I'm going to use is the curves. You go into image, adjust, curves. Now this works in a similar sort of way to levels, but there's more flexibility in it. Here's your histogram, and if I click on the dark part of the sky, you can see a blob comes up on the dark part of the sky. If I click on the white part, you can see up here, you can see another blob comes up. So what we can do in curves is we can stretch the image without stretching the dark point and the white point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the dark point. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this in at the bottom. So that's darkened the image up a little bit. And I'm going to click on that white point. And I'm going to click on the white point, which is right up here. There is another way of doing this. But if we repeat the curves, I'll show you how to do that. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be stretching the image without stretching the white and without stretching the black. So I'm just going to lift the curve up in the middle. Okay. Now you can see, despite the fact that we held the white point down, the Ornithak is getting a bit stretched, so we've got to be very careful with that. So I'm going to do a second iteration of curves. There is image adjust curves. Again, there is a way of dealing with that, but I don't want to cover that in this first tutorial. I'm just covering the very basics at the moment. So we're going to do the same again, but this time I'm going to use the other option I talked about. I'm going to click on the white point, and if you click on Alt-Gr on the keyboard at the same time, you see it's automatically fixed the white point on there. I'm going to click on the black point automatically using Alt-Gr, and I'm going to click on the nebula, which is down here. I'm also going to click on the outer part of that halo, try and stop that from stretching anymore, and I'm just going to lift it up in the middle. See, that's producing an image now. Let's have one more iteration of curves. Image adjust curves. And we're going to do exactly the same again. We'll click on the white point, click on the black point, click on the nebula, and I'm going to click on that halo because we don't want to stretch that anymore than we can avoid. Actually, I'm not sure that's going to work terribly well, but let's try getting rid of that. Click on the halo and just stretch it. Okay, so that is just the basics of levels and curves when you get into Photoshop. I only get 10 minutes on this recording and I'm already up to over 9 minutes. So I'm going to do a part 2 where I talk about the use of layers, which is a very powerful tool and something that you can use when you get a little bit more experienced. One last thing that you can do that's quite simple, if we zoom into the image, you'll find it's a little bit on the noisy side. And there's a very simple tool you can use for that, which is filter, noise, despeckle. And if you do it a couple of times, it will help clean up the image a little bit. There is a more powerful tool in filter noise, which is dust and scratches,